One of the key drivers of successful mental accounting is the extent to which the cost and the benefit in a mental account are coupled or associated with each other. If in fact that association becomes weak, then they become decoupled and it becomes harder to mentally account for that particular expense. Let's look at a simple example. Let's imagine that you love skiing and you go to the mountains of Colorado and you buy a 4-day ski pass. It's going to cost you $160, but the ski pass comes in one of two different varieties. In the picture on the top, you get one card that you carry with you with your jacket all the time that gives you access to the mountains on all 4 days. In the second case, in the bottom, you see 4 separate tickets that are attached to each other, and every day you detach one and give it at the gate. Now, here's a simple experiment. Suppose you ski, you have 3 beautiful days of skiing, and on the last day there is warm rain. Everybody tells you it's no fun skiing, but would you actually go and ski? In other words, would the sunk cost effect of having paid $40 a day make you go to the mountain and ski even in conditions when you shouldn't? Here's the interesting story, is when you look at the tickets at the bottom left, there is an explicit coupling between each day's worth of skiing and the expense, which is $40. As a result, that $40 that you've prepaid is much more likely to burn a hole in your pocket in the lower case than if in fact you had a single card, because in the card you can amortize or allocate the 3 good days of skiing across the $160 that you have spent. What we would expect is in fact people are much more likely to go skiing on a bad day in the condition at the bottom as opposed to the top. And in fact, that's exactly what we found. We found in an experiment that was run back in 1998 that people are much more likely to ski and fall prey to the sunk cost effect when they have separate tickets each day than if in fact they have just one ticket. Here's a second way in which the coupling between the expense and the benefit could diminish, and that's time. Think about the following scenario. Let's imagine that you decide to buy a subscription to a health club. And the health club asks you to pay in one of 4 fashions: once a year, quarterly, semi-annually, or monthly. It turns out that John Gorville at Harvard and I collected data from a health club back in 1999. We were able to document the payment mechanism that was used, the frequency of payment, as well as the frequency of exercising as a function of how often people paid. And here's what we found. On the top left were people who had paid once a year. And what you'll see is at the beginning, right after they paid, they were very likely to want to exercise. They were in there every single day. They were trying all the machines. The high bar or the high level on the y-axis shows that the frequency of exercising was extremely high as soon as they paid. But notice what happens as time passes. As time passes, by the time it gets to March, consumption declines, other things become more important. By the time it gets to June and July, they're consuming at about 1/3 of the extent to which they were consuming in January. And by the time it comes time to renew in November and December, they're hardly there at all. Contrast that with the graph on the bottom right. Those are folks that exercise monthly at the same rate because they pay monthly. And what's happened as a result here is that the moment you make people pay on an ongoing basis, they are much more likely to couple the benefits that they get in that given month with the cost. They are more likely to be stable at exercising. So we find across a number of different domains that the frequency with which you pay has a dramatic impact on how much you actually consume. What you'll see in the other 2 plots, the quarterly and the semi-annually, again, is that the moment you pay, your frequency spikes up, and at the end of it, it again starts declining over a period of time. Here's a second example of what I want to share with you in terms of mental accounting, and that's a phenomena called pennies a day advertising that was first made popular by John Gorville. Look at this ad for a moment. It says, if you can afford this, you can afford that. If you could read the fine print, it essentially tells you that that sofa set that's being advertised is going to cost about $1,000 a month, no matter which way you actually think about it in terms of temporal framing. But if you compare it to the cost of a yogurt per day, it suddenly starts becoming more affordable. That's called a pennies a day strategy. And the idea is simple. When we think about any expense, be it rent or taxes or coffee, we tend to have a natural time frame that goes with that expense. So I think about rent on a monthly basis, I think about coffee on a daily basis, and I think about taxes on an annual basis. And the moment you change the frame in which that time is presented, it creates an aha moment. Sometimes the aha moment works for you, like here, you say, I'm spending a few dollars on coffee or yogurt every day. Why can't I afford the sofa set, which is going to cost me the same? Sometimes the aha moment could work the opposite way. Think about this ad, for example. This is an advertisement where the aha moment was to take a annual expense and convert that into a daily expense. But the problem was that the daily expense was so high that people realized that there was nothing else that they did that cost them $19 or $20 a day. This message backfired. So the point is that when people think about a pennies a day strategy, there are two elements of the strategy. Element number one, taking a lump sum expense and expressing that as a daily expense. Element number two, providing people with a comparison, which is a consumption that they occur on an ongoing basis. Comparison with a coffee is great. We all drink coffee once a day. But comparison with something which costs $20 or $30 or $50 a day might backfire because people realize that they're actually going to spend a lot of money doing that. Here's a third way in which the coupling between cost and expenses can be weakened. And that is by making the metering process a bit more difficult. Let's think about the following. I have in front of me three currencies, 10 euros, 80 Hong Kong dollars, and about 400 Thai bahts. It turns out they're worth approximately the same. But depending on what my home currency is, I tend to value the other two currencies differently. It's easy for me to account in my home currency, but the moment you move countries or you go on a vacation, it becomes difficult because now you have lost your metering system. And the moment you convert your home currency into that foreign currency, it becomes like free money, and that free money is decoupled from the expense. Think about the following simple situation. If you're on vacation, it's the last day, you've got 400 Thai bahts sitting in your pocket, and you're back at the airport to go home. What would you do with these? Rational theory says if you haven't found any way to spend them, convert them back into Hong Kong dollars or euros. What do people really do? They look for ways to spend the remaining $400 because after all, it is play money at this point in time. We in fact did an experiment in Hong Kong where we took people, endowed them with Hong Kong dollars or a currency that we call more numerous, Thai bahts, or less numerous, the euro. And what we found was they were put into an experimental room, they had to gamble money, and we found this. What we found was when people were endowed with a more numerous currency, they tended to be more generous with their money. When people were endowed with a less numerous currency, they were much more stingy with their money. So in sum, what we've looked at here is the fact that the coupling between the expenses and the cost and the consumption can be weakened in a number of different ways. The first way is by making it difficult to couple through physical formats. The second way is to allow for the passage of time between when you pay and when you consume. And the third way is to weaken the metering system whereby people no longer have a good handle on how much they have actually spent.